Inspire IC1.5 versus Echelon EX15. In today's video, we're going to compare two extremely popular indoor cycling bikes that are Peloton alternatives that can both be purchased for about $500. In this video, we're going to cover the basic stuff as well as very in-depth stuff, like what is the Q factor of these bikes? You know, like how far apart are your feet when you're riding the bike? Also, we're going to take a look at the geometry of the bike to see how it fits tall riders as well as short riders. And we'll look at obvious stuff like the max user weight and the flywheel mass, and even how close the holes are spaced apart for the adjustability. So both these bikes do have a lot of similarities, but also there are some significant differences, so let me show you around. Starting with the very basics, the Echelon EX15 is belt driven, and so is the Inspire IC1.5. And both these bikes are magnetic resistance with a flywheel on the front of the bike, but appearance-wise, one of the very first things you'll notice is the flywheel on the Echelon EX15 or Echelon Connect Sport, whichever model you're looking at, is enclosed. So the enclosed flywheel on the Echelon Connect EX15 is one of the things that make the appearance of this bike very unique from almost every other indoor cycling bike I have. And whether or not you like the look of an enclosed flywheel, there are benefits to it that cannot be argued. One of the benefits is you can't get anything really caught in the flywheel when it's moving. The other major benefit of an enclosed flywheel is when you're riding the bike, you're not going to drip sweat down into the drivetrain. Typically, in terms of appearance, I actually kind of prefer the look of an open exposed flywheel like the Peloton Bike Plus. But on the Inspire IC1.5, the flywheel actually has like a plastic covering on it, and you know, it's fine, it looks fine, but it's really just not the most beautiful flywheel when compared to other exposed flywheels. Really though, the most important thing about the flywheel is how does it function and what is the mass? According to the manufacturer's specs, the Echelon Connect EX15 has a flywheel mass of 7 kilograms, which converts to 15.4 pounds, which is on the relatively light side of flywheels. On the other hand, the Inspire IC1.5 has a flywheel mass of 14 kilograms, which converts to about 31 pounds. So looking at the numbers on the spec sheet, the flywheel mass on the Inspire is actually double that of the Echelon EX15. But the big question is, how does this affect drivetrain feel? And more importantly, what is the maximum resistance on these two bikes? We'll get into that in just a moment, but first let me show you a few other things. One thing that's often overlooked in researching indoor cycling bikes is Q factor, and that's basically how far apart are your feet when you're riding the bike. Specifically, Q factor measures from the edge of the crank arm to the edge of the other crank arm, and earlier I got out the tape measure and measured in millimeters because that's what Q factor is measured in. And the Q factor of the Echelon EX15 comes out to 185 millimeters. As comparison, over here on the Inspire IC1.5, I measured the Q factor to be 180 millimeters from crank arm to crank arm. So really the Q factor on both these bikes is actually pretty similar. But as comparison for you, I have a list of Q factors of other bikes, like the Peloton is 170, whereas the Nordic Trek S22i was measured at 150 millimeters. Schwinn IC4 is 190, and in general, the Q factor on each of these bikes is kind of more on the wider end of the spectrum. If you are finding value in this video, please give me a thumbs up, and any questions or comments you have, please leave down below. The Inspire bike has a red resistance knob, which is very common, and it is a mechanical resistance knob, so turning this knob mechanically moves the magnets closer or further away from the flywheel. The Echelon EX15 also has a mechanical red resistance knob, and this resistance knob takes about 15 turns to go from minimum to maximum resistance, which the maximum resistance on the Echelon EX15 is number 32. As comparison, the Inspire bike has a maximum resistance of 40, and it takes about 7.5 turns to go from minimum to maximum resistance. However, those numbers, 32 and 40 for maximum resistance, are literally just that, numbers. They don't mean anything in terms of how much actual resistance you get or how that compares to the maximum resistance on the Peloton Bike Plus. So in just a few moments here, I'm going to hop on each of these bikes and compare the maximum resistance and drivetrain feel back to back, but let me show you a few other things first. Both of these two bikes are Bluetooth enabled, and that means they take power in order to work. The major difference is the Inspire does not plug into the wall, instead it runs on batteries, which there's just a little battery in here. So the benefit of the bike running on batteries is you don't need to plug it into the wall, so you could put this thing like outdoors or somewhere that does not have an outlet. On the other hand, the Echelon EX15 has a power outlet and it plugs into the wall, so if you want the Bluetooth feature to work on this bike, you have to plug it in. However, it is worth noting that you do not need to use the Bluetooth feature on either of these bikes, and since they are mechanical resistance knobs, these bikes will work if they're plugged in, if they have power, or no power at all. However, if you choose to use the Bluetooth feature on the bike, this little blue light here on the Echelon will light up, and you can pull up the app and choose freestyle mode. And you don't need to sign up for the Echelon app to get these metrics. Say if you want to use your own platform like the Peloton app, or if you want to use Apple Fitness Plus or some other platform, you simply pull up this little app and it'll show you all your important metrics like cadence, resistance, power output in kilojoules, calories, speed, and distance. Additionally, you can hook up a heart rate monitor to the app and it'll display your heart rate right here on the screen. Over here on the IC1.5, there's a very similar option. All you do is press quick start here and you get all of the same exact metrics like RPM, which is cadence, your power output, the resistance number you're on, as well as your total output in kilojoules. You also get calories, speed, and distance. So as far as I'm concerned, both of these bikes give you all of the important metrics for indoor cycling rides, with the big one being power output. A lot of bikes that I've reviewed don't give you that power output, whereas both of these bikes do give you that metric. Of course, you can use the native platform, so you can use the Echelon app to use the live classes and on-demand classes, and you can also use the Inspire live classes and on-demand classes. But the neat thing about each of these bikes is they are open platform in a sense where, it gives you your basic metrics without needing to pay for a subscription, and you can use the basic tablet holder up here to run whatever app you would like. So if you buy the Echelon EX15, you can get the Inspire classes and do the Inspire classes over here. And also, if you buy the Inspire bike, you could get the Echelon app and do the Echelon app over here. But let's be honest, I'd say most people who are going to be buying one of these bikes and using it in an outside platform, they're probably going to be going for the Peloton digital app, which costs about 13 bucks a month. So if that's the route you're going to go, you could set the whole bike up here in front of a TV like this, or you could put a little tablet up here in the tablet holder of the Inspire. Or over here on the Echelon, you could put your tablet right here. And while we're talking about tablet holders, I should note that you are limited to a certain size tablet that you could actually fit on the Inspire. Although it will probably be a little bit more secured in there because of this little security thing right here. On the Echelon EX15, you simply get a little lip right here to kind of hold it in place, and there is no limit on how big it could be, although it will be a little bit less secure if you try to put something too big on there. And speaking of size, both of these bikes are relatively small and maneuverable, especially when compared to a massive bike like the Peloton Bike Plus or like the NordicTrack S22i. I did a little measurement earlier and the Inspire IC1.5 is like 1 or 2 inches wider in terms of the stability bars. However, in terms of the distance from the front to back stability bar, the Inspire is 1 inch shorter than the Echelon EX15, if I remember correctly. And according to the manufacturer's spec sheet, both of these bikes have a maximum user weight of 300 pounds. And also, while we're talking about the size, I want to take a moment to look at the geometry of these two bikes. So if you look at the Inspire IC1.5, you can see that the handlebars go further away from you as you raise up, and they get closer as they raise down. And this does actually have a pretty significant impact, especially as you drop everything down to the lowest settings, which we'll get into that in just a moment. But before we do that, I want to show you the pedals on both these bikes. So the Echelon EX15 actually comes with a relatively large and comfortable platform pedal, and on the other side you get a cage option. Now this pedal does not come with the actual SPD clip-in mechanism. However, it is possible to buy that separately and install it on this pedal. I did find a place where you can buy this SPD clip-in pedal thing, although it does seem maybe a little bit kind of sketchy, so it might be better just to put on completely different pedals if you want SPD clip-ins. Also, while we're down here, I would like to point out that crank arm length from center to center is 6.75 inches on this bike. Over here on the Inspire bike, the crank arm is the exact same length at 6 3/4 inches. However, the thing that is different on the Inspire bike is the pedals. These are steel teeth pedals with a relatively smaller platform that I personally find to be a little bit less comfortable to the foot. However, the other side is the exact same cage style pedal that you can use, cage style shoes on. Also, on the other side of the pedal, you do not get a SPD clip-in. So both these bikes do have very beginner-friendly pedals. If I had to pick one pedal I like more than the other, I'd say the Echelon EX15 is the more comfortable pedal. However, the crank arm threading on each of these bikes is standard, so you can put any pedals you want on either bike. For example, on my Peloton Bike Plus, the crank arm threading is also standard, and I put these Shimano SPD clip-in pedals on because they're really easy to clip in and clip out from, and the shoes that are compatible with them you can actually walk around on without having a big clunky mechanism under your foot. Here's what the seat looks like on the Inspire IC1.5. It is relatively narrow, definitely has a little bit of squish to it. Overall, not too bad. Personally, it's not my favorite seat. I actually prefer a more firm seat like over here on the Peloton Bike Plus. However, a lot of beginners like to have a really soft seat to begin with, which the Inspire IC1.5 includes this nice big squishy gel cover for the seat to make your seat even softer if that's your thing. The Echelon EX15 saddle is basically the exact same as what you get on the Inspire IC1.5. If you haven't had a chance to see the Inspire handlebars yet, this is what they look like. They have a flat surface here on front. Position 2 is here, and position 3 for out of the saddle is out here. Also, you could potentially grip right here for just a little modifier grip. The handlebars are flat across, and looking from this angle, they do arch up a little bit in position 2, and position 3 comes up a little bit more. Moving straight on over here to the Echelon EX15, we can see the entire assembly just comes up a little bit higher in general, and position 3 out here is a little bit more angled up. Position 2 is just fine. The handlebars are flat across this way. And from in the saddle, this is what the hand grip positions look like. You could potentially maybe grab here for a relief. This is your main grip here, position 2 and position 3. Out here in position 3, I kind of do like this little dimple that you kind of can put your thumb in a little bit there. The material of both the handlebars is a very nice rubber coated material, and I like it on both handlebars. So let's take a few minutes here to talk about the adjustability because it is kind of significant on these bikes. One of the very first things about the Inspire IC1.5 is the angle of that handlebar. It really kind of just makes a huge difference in terms of how close the handlebars are to you in the bottom position to the top position. And one thing I would like to point out about the Inspire IC1.5 is the saddle stability on max height. So it kind of has like a little bit of a rock to it. I noticed a few people commented about this in the comment section, and then once I started spending some more time on this bike, I definitely noticed it does have like just a little bit of like a rock and wiggle to it. On the Echelon EX15, when the saddle is on maximum height, it definitely feels a lot more stable and sturdy and does not have that wobble to it. So if you are tall and plan on riding these bikes on their maximum saddle height, that might be something you would want to take into consideration. The Inspire bike has 14 levels of adjustment for moving the seat up and down. And for the handlebars, there are 9 levels of adjustment. And there are holes you need to click into, and I measured the distance between the holes earlier, and they are 20 millimeters spaced apart on this bike. As comparison, the Echelon EX15 has holes you click into, but they are spaced 15 millimeters apart, so they are a little bit closer apart, so you can get better micro adjustments by a little bit on the EX15. In total, you get 17 levels of adjustment on the Echelon. And for the handlebars, you get 9 levels of adjustment. The saddle can move forwards and backwards quite a bit here, and there are no holes to click into, so you do get micro adjustments for moving the saddle. And you get the same exact feature on the Inspire bike. And one of the big differences here is the geometry. So as you can see, as you raise the saddle up, it gets away from you at about that angle, and roughly the same angle the handlebars come up towards you. So the handlebars and the seat basically kind of stay about the same far apart. Now you can independently adjust the saddle to move closer and further away. However, the saddle height should be determined by getting your knee lined up to be properly over the ball of your foot. So the biggest difference about geometry and the way these bikes adjust is you can see this saddle goes a little bit further away from you as you raise it up, but look at the angle of the handlebars. As you drop that down, it gets significantly closer to you. So technically this is a two-way adjustable bike, but really, it's kind of adjusting it forwards and backwards as you raise it and lower it too. So now what I want to do is hop on both these bikes back to back, side to side, and kind of show you the minimum and maximum height settings, and also compare the drivetrain feel and the minimum and maximum resistance, and just kind of share and explain my thoughts and opinions on comparing these two bikes. So over here on the Echelon EX15 to start with, everything is on the maximum height. If you have not seen this before, I'm 6'5". My inseam is about 34. This bike about fits me. I would say at 6'5", you would probably want the saddle to come up just a little bit higher to be to have a perfect fit on this bike, but you know, it's pretty close and it can work. As comparison over here on the Inspire IC1.5, I do feel like the saddle height from the bottom of the pedal to the saddle is maybe like a ½ inch higher. So maybe if you're like really tall like me, this bike might fit you a little bit better. I actually went and grabbed the tape measure real quick and measured from the pedal to the seat, the top of the seat, and the Inspire does have about a 1 inch more difference between that bottom of the pedal stroke there to the top of the seat. And also, I would like to point out the pedal does just get a little bit closer to the ground on the Inspire, whereas on the Echelon, it doesn't get quite as close. Also, while we're looking here from this perspective, we can see that the handlebars do come higher on the Echelon bike as in comparison to the Inspire. So if you want a more comfortable upright riding position, you'll be able to get that better on the Echelon bike. So now what I did is I dropped everything to its minimum settings, and the seats are all the way forward on both these bikes, just to kind of give you an idea of what that might look like. You know, I'm really tall, obviously, so this looks ridiculous, but just to give you an idea in case you are on the shorter end of the spectrum, what it might look like for you. Over here on the Inspire with everything on the minimum settings, the big thing that I can notice about this bike at the extreme down here on the very minimum settings is the handlebars do come closer to me. So if you have short legs and short arms, the Inspire IC1 might actually be better for you in terms of reach. Taking a quick look at the measurement here from the front of the handlebars to the front of the saddle, on the minimum measurements comes out to about a 12-inch reach here from the front of the saddle to the front of the handlebars. Taking that same exact measurement from the front of the handlebar position to the front of the saddle on the Echelon comes out to 16 inches. So there's actually a 4-inch difference in reach on the minimum, very minimum, lowest settings. So really, this is kind of something you should probably only take into consideration if you're extremely small. I would say both of these bikes do fit the average sized person just fine. So now let's take a look at the drivetrains and the maximum resistance of both these bikes. So starting over here on the Echelon, I am going to use my cycling shoes. I'm in the cages because neither of these bikes have SPD clip-in pedals. Starting over here on resistance 1, very light, just, you know, anybody could do resistance 1, just there's no resistance here really. Showing my cadence right up here on the screen, I'm at 78, right around 80 cadence, 85 cadence, output is 27. Let me add on a little bit of resistance here. So that's resistance 2, 4, 8. So the first few turns, the resistance on both of these bikes really is not very linear. Like the first, you know, so this bike goes out of 32 resistances, but the first like 10, there's really not like a whole lot of change in resistance happening. You know, by the time I get to 10, I can feel some resistance kind of coming on. But you know, from like 1 to 5, it's basically no real resistance change. So I'm on resistance 10 right now, kind of just turning the pedals over. Feels like a very nice feeling drivetrain. Despite the flywheel on this bike being so light, it actually is like a really good feeling drivetrain. It's a very smooth feeling drivetrain. The magnetic resistance on this bike feels really nice and smooth. So now I'm going to crank out a little more resistance here. That turned it up to 15, and I could feel pretty good jump come on there. And now I'm at 19, 20 resistance, not quite 20, 20 resistance. And now like this feels like a pretty good like flat road, maybe slight uphill riding resistance. At 20, I kind of feel like, you know, I could get out of the saddle and kind of do a little bit of out of the saddle riding. Cadence here is about 85, power output is 160. Feels like a nice smooth drivetrain. I like this Echelon bike. This was my very first indoor cycling bike. I actually really like this variation of the Echelon Connect. I feel like it's a really good bang for the buck. You get like a lot for your money. The drivetrain on this bike feels good. I feel like the max resistance, which we'll get to in just a moment, is pretty sufficient for most beginners. So like if you're thinking about buying this bike, I really don't see any reason why not to. Like I said, this was my very first bike I had here, and I think it's a great introduction to indoor cycling. And yeah, if you haven't seen my other videos, I have a full review, which I'll put a card to it up here and a link down in the description box as well. So I'm on resistance 20. Let me crank the resistance up here a little bit more. So it's kind of like, it starts to get a little exponential towards like the higher end because those magnets are getting closer and closer to the flywheel. And just kind of like the physics properties there, it kind of really ramps up a lot. So I'm on 25 now. Resistance is getting pretty heavy. My cadence is all the way down to 50 with power output 100. And then now I'm at resistance 30. Cadence is 50. Power output is 200. And resistance 32. Cadence is 40. Let me see if I can get that up. Cadence is 60. Power output is 300. So you can put down some seriously good power on this bike. Pretty good max resistance, really. I think most beginners would be pretty happy with this max resistance. Although, you know, it's not like the same max resistance as you get on the Peloton Bike Plus. Let's see what kind of cadence I can do on max. Right around 56, and that's 280 watts. So that's actually pretty hard to do in the saddle, max resistance. Like I can get the cadence up to 60-ish, 65. The power spike of about 350 there. So max resistance on this bike, I think most beginners would be pretty content with this bike, but over time you could outgrow the max resistance on the Echelon Connect as well as the Inspire. So let's hop over there to the Inspire. All right, over here on the Inspire, minimum resistance. The first thing I always notice about this bike is the app disconnects relatively quickly. So like I mentioned before, the Echelon plugs into the wall, and that Bluetooth like will stay hooked up and connected as long as it's plugged in. This bike, on the other hand, runs on batteries, so it's like always trying to like turn off to conserve battery life, which makes sense, you know. But you know, if you like stop pedaling this bike, it'll like try to end your quick ride session on you pretty regularly. So it's kind of a struggle to like keep this thing like up and running, I guess, in a way, because like if you stop pedaling, it will try and shut down and disconnect on you. So over here on the Inspire on resistance 1, definitely has like a different drivetrain feel to it. You can hear this one makes a little bit of noise, not like in a bad way. Basically the Echelon EX15 is completely silent, whereas as you add on more and more resistance on the Inspire IC1.5, it does make like a little bit of a noise. Not a problem, just something I observed. So in terms of drivetrain feel over here on the Inspire bike, it feels pretty good. You know, it's on resistance 1, basically just turns over just freely, no resistance. Anybody could do this resistance. Let's add on a little bit of resistance now. So this is resistance 4, basically didn't feel any change. RPMs are at 90, power output is 35, 40. Resistance is now 10. So this bike goes resistance 1 to 40 is max, and we're on 11. So on resistance 11 here, just very, very minimal resistance. Let me go back to 1, and yeah, there's like a little bit of a change there, not much, but let's go on up towards about 20. Okay, so yeah, feel a little bit more resistance coming on. Crank it up some more. 25. 27. So on resistance 27, RPMs are 86, power output is 120. Feels like a good drivetrain, you know? It really feels pretty similar in general to the Echelon Connect EX15. In terms of drivetrain feel, I really wouldn't say like either one of these bikes feels better or worse than the other. They both just kind of have a little bit of a unique drivetrain feel. Both the flywheels have pretty good momentum, really. Even though that one has a much lighter flywheel, it still has pretty good momentum, really. The flywheel mass on the Inspire is like twice as much, but I'm not really sure what's going on the inside of that enclosure on the Echelon Connect, but it is a good feeling drivetrain on both these bikes. So cranking it on up here more towards resistance 32, 36, 38, 40. So after 40, at 40 here, you can hear the noise. RPMs are 72. Power output says 273. If I get in the saddle, 66 RPMs, 65. Power output is 240. That's pretty hard to do. So, I mean, max resistance wise, I'm gonna have to hop back and forth here and see which one has a higher max. This one, you can turn it past 40 and it'll apply a physical brake. Now you don't really want to do that, but it can be done. So listen to the noise. So if you like really want to crank up the max resistance, which I wouldn't recommend you do because it's going to wear out that brake pad, and then the magnets are going to actually start touching the flywheel. But it can be done. Physically, it can be done. So this bike is on max resistance. Let me just feel it out again real quick and then go over there for comparison. RPMs, 75, power output, 300. In the saddle, RPMs, 62, 60, yeah, 60, power output is 220. Hopping straight back over here, this bike just like stays connected, and like, so the Inspire just tries to like disconnect on me all the time. All I had to do was like pull up the app on this bike and it's like right there ready for me. So max resistance, cadence 75. Power output is measured much higher on this bike, like 370, 360. Whew. Man, legs are burning. I should warm up more than what I'm warming up here. So in the saddle, cadence 65. My legs are dying, guys. Yeah, so yeah, this max resistance is wearing me out real quick here today. But what I'm noticing here is the power output on the Echelon bike is actually reading significantly higher. And that's like a calibration thing. I don't know which bike is accurate. If I had to guess, the power output numbers I'm seeing, I'd say the Echelon EX15 is actually more accurate based on what the Peloton Bike Plus gives me. Like when I do like hard efforts like that, my power output on the Peloton Bike Plus reads more like 350s, maybe 400. And this bike is giving me like those numbers. So here, now I'm a little rusted again. Cadence 65, power output 420, 440, 450. So maybe that's a little bit high. You know, it's pretty close. It's really pretty close. It's really, really close. I might have to say the Echelon EX15 actually has a very slightly higher max resistance, but not like a whole lot. Yeah, the max resistance over here on the Echelon EX15, I would say is probably slightly more, but really it's not like a huge, it's not a huge difference. Okay, so let me leave you with my final thoughts between these two bikes. So, you know, they're both about the exact same price point, really, roughly, you know, about 500 bucks, depending on what the current prices are. I do have a link below this video to buy either of these bikes if you're interested. And I do have a full in-depth review on the Echelon EX15 if you haven't seen that. Put a little card up here and link in the description. The Echelon EX15 is extremely popular. It is a very, very common DIY Peloton bike. The Inspire IC1.5 also seems to be a pretty good option to make a DIY Peloton. The Echelon EX15 is a little bit safer with that enclosed flywheel, and also the enclosed flywheel will help keep sweat out of the drivetrain to potentially make it a longer lasting, more durable bike over time. Both of these bikes do have the red resistance knob that is a mechanical operating device, so you don't need to plug either of these bikes into electricity in order for that resistance knob to work. However, both of these bikes can power up and do have Bluetooth and will give you your metrics such as your power output, your cadence, and your resistance number on the app through your screen. Either one of these bikes you can hook up and do the Peloton digital app. Just bring an extra monitor and hook that up. In my full Echelon review, I show how to hook up, multiple tablets and all that if you're trying to make a DIY Peloton. The drivetrain feel on both of these bikes is actually really pretty good considering the price point. The max resistance, they are roughly the same. It's really hard to say which one has a higher maximum resistance. They kind of just both have a slightly different drivetrain feel, but I like them both. I do think the Echelon EX15 has a very slightly higher maximum resistance. In terms of adjustability, the saddle height on the Inspire IC1.5 does come up just slightly higher. However, once you do extend it up to the maximum saddle height slot, it does have a wobble to it. So, you should take that into consideration, I suppose, if you don't want your seat to be wobbly, because the max saddle height on the Echelon does not have that wobble. In terms of minimum adjustments, if you are a particularly short person, the Inspire IC1.5 does have these handlebars that come closer to the seat as they drop down. So if reaching out to grab the handlebars is a big concern to you, if you're particularly short, the Inspire IC1.5 might be a better fit for you. That being said, I do think that both of these bikes will fit the average person up to, probably about 6'4"-ish pretty well. I'm 6'5", and I would say that I'm definitely maxing out the height on either of these bikes. Max weight for each of these bikes is 300 pounds according to the manufacturer. And even though the flywheel mass is more on the Inspire IC1.5, as we've learned on other bikes like the Kaiser M3i, which I do have a review on that bike, the Kaiser M3i is one of the best feeling drivetrains and highest max resistance bikes that I have out of any of these bikes here, including the Peloton Bike Plus, and it has the lightest flywheel. So I think that there is like a big misconception about flywheel mass that can add some momentum, obviously, but there's more to it, like the gear sizes and the pulley system and all that going on the inside. So I don't think that flywheel mass is necessarily as important as is made out to be on the forums online. That being said, the drivetrain feel on both of these bikes is really good, and I like the drivetrain feel on each of these bikes. And in case you missed it earlier, the Q factor on the Echelon EX15 is 185 millimeters as I measured it, and 180 is the Q factor on the Inspire. That being said, the Q factor between these two bikes is so close, I can't tell a difference from one bike to the other. So all things considered, both these bikes are actually pretty good DIY Peloton alternatives and good beginner indoor cycling bikes. That being said, if I had to choose one of these two bikes to go with for my indoor cycling bike, I'd probably go with the Echelon EX15 just because that is what I did go with to begin with. The Echelon EX15 was my very first indoor cycling bike, and I think it's a pretty good bike and a really good bang for the buck. The Echelon EX15 is a little bit more safe because it has that enclosed flywheel, so a child's fingers aren't going to get caught in there, a pet's not going to get caught in there. It's a little bit more quiet, and that housing will protect sweat from dripping down on the flywheel. Additionally, I do think the maximum resistance on the Echelon EX15 is a little bit more. It's not much, but I do think the maximum resistance is just slightly more on the Echelon. Also, at my height of 6'5", when I have the saddle on the maximum height of the Inspire, it is a little bit wobbly on maximum height. Anyway, this is just my thoughts and opinion and comparison video between these two highly popular indoor cycling bikes. If you want to see more videos on either of these bikes, I do have plenty more videos and a full review on each of these bikes on my channel. So check the links below this video in the description box and browse my channel for other indoor cycling bikes. Just remember, these are not your only two options for a DIY Peloton or a budget-friendly indoor cycling bike. There are many other good options out there. These are two good options, but not the only two. So browse my channel, click that thumbs up button if this video has been helpful to you at all. Leave any questions or comments down below this video in the comment section. Click that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in my next video.